4 things happened this week, and if you line them up next to each other, they are not 4 separate stories. They are one story about who gets to decide whether African leaders leave or get removed. And the part that should make you uncomfortable, some of the people making those decisions look exactly like you and me. April 2nd, 2026, the Human Rights Watch drops a report on Burkina Faso titled "None Can Run Away." Now, according to that report, more than 1,800 civilians have been unalived, and they are blaming government forces.
In a scathing report, Human Rights Watch says Burkina Faso's government forces and jihadists together killed more than 1,800 civilians between 2023 and 2025.
Now, your first instinct is probably one of 2 things. Either somebody finally is holding this government accountable, or how did we get here again? Now, hold that thought, because the truth lives somewhere between them. Now, here is what that report doesn't mention upfront. France operated in the Sahel for over a decade. Burkina Faso was still burning, schools were still closed, children were still being unalived. Where was the Human Rights Watch then? And here is the timing. Human Rights dropped their report on the 2nd of April. 1 day later, Switzerland pledged $23 million to Burkina Faso. Now, Switzerland doesn't do charity. Switzerland does strategy. So Western NGOs are calling Traore's government criminal, while Western governments are quietly investing in his administration. That's not contradiction, that's negotiation. But here is what Traore's response actually was. And it wasn't a deflection. He asked the journalist a simple question. What exactly is a human right? Is it a report? Is it a press release? A statement of concern from an NGO office in New York? Or is it a child who stays alive? Or a school that stays open? A family that can sleep without hearing gunfire? Because Traore's argument was this: his soldiers are dying to protect civilians from terrorism. Schools that were locked shut because of jihadist attacks are reopening under his government. Children who couldn't go to class for years are now going back, and the entire time that was happening, the same organizations now writing reports about him sent nothing. Not medical supplies, not food, not equipment, not one cartridge to fight terrorism that was unaliving those children. So when they say he is violating human rights, his counter is clean and brutal. The right to education is a human right. He's fighting for it. The people who funded nothing helped nobody and watch while terrorists burned schools. They are the ones writing human rights now. And then he went further. He told the journalist that human rights didn't originate from Europe. They didn't come from Geneva or New York. They came from Africa. And he is historically correct. 1222 AD, the Manden Charter, West Africa, Mali Empire. That document laid out the right to life, liberty and protection from arbitrary persecution. And that was 726 years before the United Nations wrote their own version of human rights. But does invoking African history mean every accusation against him is false? Or does it mean he's smart enough to use history as a shield? Because here is the playbook, and this is bigger than just one country. The document the human rights brought is just step 1. Then comes the headlines. Then come the sanctions. Then comes the regime change attempt. We saw this in Libya, Zimbabwe, Sudan. Same structure, different country on the cover. Now, Burkina Faso is on the cover. The question isn't really whether the human rights report is true or false. The question is who benefits from its landing right now. Now, before we get to the Chechen signal, I need to give you the context that most analysts are skipping. You see, for the last 1 or 2 years, a very uncomfortable question has been floating around foreign policy circles. Is Russia actually as powerful as it claims to be? Now, think about it. When the US pressured Maduro in Venezuela, Russia, which had troops and advisors there, largely watched. When Israel struck inside Iran directly, Russia, which has defense relationship with Tehran, said very little. When US-backed forces moved in ways that directly challenged Russian interest, the response was often words, statements, condemnations. Analysts started noticing a pattern, and here is why that matters deeply. Russia's influence, especially with countries that have chosen to partner with Moscow over Washington, rests on one promise: I will back you. That's the deal. You leave the Western orbit, you accept Russian partnership, and in return, Russia has your back when things get difficult. But if you watch Russia not show up for Venezuela, not push back meaningfully when Iran gets hit, not intervene when its allies come under pressure, that promise starts to sound hollow. So, into March 31st, 2026, the US is pressing Iran hard on its nuclear program. Deadlines issued, military assets positioned, and quietly a signal goes out. Now, according to reports from Press TV and India Today, see, I'll be transparent because Press TV is Iranian. India Today is independent, none confirmed by Western intelligence. Chechen military unit, the Kadyrovsky, personnel army of Ramzan Kadyrov, Putin's most loyal enforcer, have announced they are ready to deploy to Iran if the US send troops into Iran. Now, read that in the context I just told you. This isn't just deterrence. This is Russia trying to fix a credibility problem. Kadyrov's announcement is a message not just to Washington but to every country watching. We didn't forget Venezuela. We didn't forget Iran's strikes. And this time, if you cross the line, you will meet us on the other side. Now, whether Russia would actually follow through, that's a separate question entirely. But the signal, the loud, public, deliberate signal, is designed to build credibility that silence eroded. Because Russia and Iran share something that is deeper than friendship. They share fear. Iran watched what happened in Iraq in 2003 when the US acted alone. Russia watched Yugoslavia in 1999. Both drew the same conclusion: if we don't build deterrence together, we are next. And here is the part that makes this genuinely different from every other US-Iran standoff. In the past, Iran faced American pressure essentially alone. Now Russia is publicly signaling, for the first time with this kind of specificity, that it wouldn't let that happen. Now, whether you believe that signal or not, Washington has to calculate as if it might be true, simply because you cannot start a war and discover mid-operation who else you are fighting. Now, before you grin, the last time two nuclear power-backed powers stumbled this close to direct confrontation, we called it the Cuban Missile Crisis. Now, that was just 13 days in 1962. This one has been building for years. When the biggest military powers lock horns, who always pays the price? Never them. It's the countries whose currencies collapse when the dollar spikes, whose food imports dry up when shipping lanes become war zones. Now, Iran controls the Strait of Hormuz. 20% of the world's traded oil passed through that channel. That simply means a war in the Persian Gulf doesn't stay in the Persian Gulf. Now, hold this thought before we move. The three countries that voted against recognizing the slave trade as the gravest crime against humanity, the United States, Israel, and Argentina. The countries currently threatening Iran, same week, same actors, different stages. Now, coincidence is possible. Pattern is worth studying. Now, quick quiz before we move on. The Strait of Hormuz carries what percentage of the world's traded oil? A, 8%, B, 20%, C, 35%. Drop your answers before the end of this video. Let's go to the third story. March 25, 2026, the UN General Assembly voted. 123 countries said yes, 52 abstained, 3 said no. Over 15 million human beings were taken from Africa and trafficked across the Atlantic. According to Royal Museum's Greenwich research, 450,000 of those transported on British ships alone were unalived during the crossing. I didn't say they were unalived in battle. They were unalived while crossing. And 3 countries looked at 500 years of that and say we can't call that the gravest crime. Israel's ambassador to Ghana released an official statement. Their objection, and this is what he had to say. The ambassador was given reasons why Israel voted no. He said calling it the gravest crime creates a hierarchy among atrocities and could, they said specifically, weaken the significance of the Holocaust. Here's what's worth actually sitting with. Germany has reportedly paid close to $80 billion in Holocaust reparations. There are memorials, annual ceremonies. The transatlantic slave trade has no comparable memorial, no comparable reparations, no comparable recognition. So when Israel say they don't want to create a hierarchy of suffering, the hierarchy already exists. Their suffering is real, but so is this. And the same logic that says never forget for one atrocity cannot be the logic that says don't rank it for another. Leader of the UK Conservative Party, born in London, grew up in Lagos to Nigerian parents. Her reaction to this vote? She was furious, not to the 3 countries who voted no, at Britain for not joining them. She posted on X, Russia, China and Iran vote with others to demand trillions in reparations from UK taxpayers. And the Labour government abstained. Britain led the fight to end slavery. Why didn't Stammer's representative vote against this? Ignorance or cowardice? Now, there is something worth naming when a president of African descent uses their platform to argue that a vote recognizing African suffering should have been defeated. When Britain abolished slavery in 1833, the government paid compensation, not to the enslaved, to the slave owners. According to the Guardian and historical archives, the British government paid approximately £20 million to people who had owned other human beings. That debt was financed as a loan, and British taxpayers were still making payments on it until 2015. When the money was going to slave owners, Kemi Badenoch said nothing. When the possibility of compensating those who were enslaved actually comes up, she calls it cowardice to even abstain. Britain abstained from the vote. You need to remember that. Now, Ghana's foreign minister, Samuel Okudzeto Ablakwa, had a message for her. Go back and read your history. The vote was non-binding. No money changes hands. No legal obligation was created. So why did one of the 3 powerful nations on earth fight this hard to stop a resolution that legally does almost nothing? What are they provoking? Now, one thing before we connect all of this, Switzerland just gave Burkina Faso $23 million. Not the US, not France, not the EU. Switzerland. When Scandinavian diplomats left the Sahel after Traore expelled the French, they said there was no reason to stay. Switzerland disagreed. You see, leaders don't spend $23 million on a leader they think is about to fall. They spend it on a leader they think is worth knowing in 5 years. Now, investments follow legitimacy, and legitimacy is no longer decided in Paris alone or Washington. Something is shifting in who gets to decide. Now, 4 stories, 1 threat. For Traore, you don't get to define what rights mean for my people. For the UN vote, you don't get to tell us our suffering doesn't count. Chechen, you don't get to move unilaterally in this world without dragging the rest of us in. Badenoch, I will use my voice to protect the system, not the people the system harmed. Now, every single one of those stories is about the same thing. The right to define yourself, your history, your rights, your suffering, your future, your story. African history, African dignity, African sovereignty is being contested right now. In reports, in votes, in parliaments, in press conferences. Traore is fighting to tell his. 123 countries fought to tell theirs. And someone who would have used her Nigerian roots to amplify that story choose to use her voice to bury it. The question isn't whether you're watching. The question is whether you're doing anything about it.